Welcome to the Harnessing Happiness podcast. Upbeat vibes generated and transferred to you. Now here's your host, Sarah J Naylor.
Hello and welcome to Harnessing Happiness with myself, Sarah J Naylor. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, it's great to have you as my listeners and know that you're all over the world, which is so exciting. Anyway, without much further ado, I'm going to introduce you to, well, I'm not going to introduce, I'm going to get her to introduce herself, but I have the fab Caroline, aka Gibbs, with me today. And the reason I can call her Gibbs is because I've known her for donkey's years now. So I'm going to introduce the fab Caroline Gibbs to you, who can introduce herself, but now you know who she is. But anyway, over to you, Caroline.
Oh, thanks, Sarah, for that, or Nailz as I call her, for that clear and concise introduction. My name is Caroline Gibbs, and I was trying to have a little think earlier on about how do I introduce myself. And what I like about a progressive journey through life is that every time I think about how to introduce myself, it changes. Because I change. So my sort of bog standard description that might be somewhere on a website somewhere, it may be out of date by now. So today I view myself as an experienced listener, an honest speaker, a coach, a group facilitator. I have a group called Yourself in the World, which is an online wellbeing discussion group. I'd like to think of myself as an aspirational writer and poet, but note the word aspirational, not inspirational. And all in all, I'm a very interested in you person.
Ooh, I love all of those titles, Gibbs. And I was thinking as you were saying that you're forever changing and forever sort of recreating yourself. I was thinking, really? So you're a bit of a modern day Madonna?
Well, now that you mention it, no.
It's nothing to do with the sort of the conical bra that you're wearing at the moment.
What's to do with the lacy hairbands and the gloves with no fingers? It's not that then. And the right skirt. That vague memories of that, and that wasn't my generation. That was my daughter's generation.
Yeah, but you have got legs to die for, Gibbs.
That is true. I can't argue with
it. Is very, very, very true. Yes. And I'm going to say this to the audience now. And eyebrows too.
Eyebrows. I mean, we would be without my eyebrows. Every morning, yes. Just before I go out, I say to myself, oh God, have I penciled my eyebrows in? Because they are my greatest form of communication. And I'm only sorry that your listeners will not be able to benefit from my fullest expressions of my feelings via my eyebrows.
And for the benefit of the listeners, this is absolutely true. Caroline, aka Gibbs, expresses herself extremely well through the use of eyebrows, and her humour, as you will discover, is very deadpan. She makes me howl most of the time because you think, is she being serious? But you know there's this this very, very naughty undercurrent of humour, which the eyebrows do tend to give away. So anytime that they're thinking she's being very serious, you've got to imagine that the eyebrow is raising above the spectacles as I'm looking at her.
Enough now. Don't tease your audience, Nailz.
They shall just have to meet you in real life. Oh dear, but our paths met. Oh my gosh, we've known each other for a long time now, which is why I was so keen to bring you on, because our journeys have really sort of changed along the way, haven't we? But we both qualified and studied at slightly different times with the same training body for, coaches. So we've both got a level 5 qualification in performance coaching as of about 10 years standing, is it?
I think I got my certificate in early 2012. So I think I did it in 2011 then. I think I did it with Liz Abraham, or Bram as we call her. You've had Liz on before, haven't you?
I've had Bram on, yeah. So, because I started studying at the back end of 2011 and I qualified in the 2012. Oh. But we met on the sort of online graduate supervision, didn't we?
That's right.
And then several years later, we thought, I think we've just somewhat gone a little bit above and beyond with our experience at the new graduate coaches. So we formed our own breakaway group, and you formed it actually. It was you that
never did, really, wasn't it? I mean, it was a fantastic group. We're not all there all the time when we meet up now, but we've got a good core membership with our little group that we keep
Absolutely
each other.
And obviously, like you said, you me and Bram, we all meet up on a regular basis as well, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The conversations that we have, and we're sharing each other's journeys along the way.
Yes, and I think we all bring very different things to our sessions together. And earlier this week, I mean, I've been sort of diarying about it ever since, is the conversations that you and Liz had with me about where I felt a little bit stuck earlier this week. And that was extremely helpful to me. And I suppose good advice is more helpful when you trust the people that are giving it, and you know that they know you really well, and that also they've got your best interests at heart. And they're speaking from experience, they're speaking from a place of love and sort of non-judgment, if you like, and not what you need to do is, not sort of trying to boss you into doing something. I think all of those aspects have been really important to me.
But that's great to hear. But isn't that the beauty of sort of the coach training and the journey that we've all been on, and how, I have to say, I have, over the last few years, been sort of somewhat alarmed by the volume of coaches, in inverted commas, that are out there that, yes, they've got a coaching certification. However, when I know the journey that we went on in terms of what it took to get to that qualification, because obviously it incorporated NLP and all nature of, there was so much learning to it. And obviously we've all done so much more since. But there was a depth to it. There was a lot of work that we had to do with the learning and the sort of the guinea pig coaches.
That was really important. Back in the day, you had to find some sort of piece of equipment where you could actually film your guinea pig, if you like, sessions and send them in to be critiques, and you had to write up a big report yourself on how you felt it gone, what had been your purpose, what tools had you brought to it, had they been effective. It was, as you say, very in-depth and not a quick overnight, a bit like passing a driving test in the quickest way. It was a long course, really.
Yeah, but it was very, very well put together, wasn't there? There was so much that was covered, and it's sort of because we did so much that was oh gosh, you had so many experiences, you had so many things you had to prove as examples. That resonates, and you because you're having to work with those coaches, you're having to for the benefit of the listener, when we were doing this course, we had to find, I think it was half a dozen people that wanted to experience some coaching to help us practice our trade, but we would have to write a plan before we actually did the coaching session, send that off for supervision, have that critiqued, conduct the session, then do the follow-up, and it was all critiqued, it was all supervised. So there was this constant feedback, wasn't there? And sort of, but with unconditional positive regard, which was really empowering, because they always focused in on the bits that you were doing right, as opposed to and where the bits where obviously you weren't, there was a question mark. How would you have done this, or how could you have done that? But there was you were never ever reprimanded for doing something incorrectly.
No.
Did you get told off, Caroline?
Oh, is that my eyebrow again? Oh dear, naughty.
I think the eyebrow went up there, listeners.
Can your eyebrow have a knee-jerk reaction? I don't know, but anyway.
Now that's an interesting conundrum.
No, I think to answer your question, which you directly asked me, which was, did you get told off then? I think the honest answer to that, and I am an honest speaker, is that I felt told off. But I may well have been just being helped to see where I might need to reflect on my coaching and reconsider how would be the best way to help that client. But that was the whole thing about the course that I wanted to interject into what you were saying about the benefits of it, which was, for me, it was a great opportunity for self-reflection. You couldn't get away with much, basically.
No.
I felt, especially when you went to the Derby days, as I'd call them, whereas a lot of this course was online. But when it was the at home in Derby days, at our tutor's home, That's
Yes.
when you couldn't really get away with anything, because you'd be there. You'd all be there around the table, either in the sitting room or at the, in the meeting room. And there was no real escaping from looking at yourself as a developing coach, or being asked to pop in front of a mirror and have a little look. Oh, yes.
No, it was really fascinating. I have to say, the journey that I went on through the study to become a coach was one very much of enlightenment, of change, of advancement, of the personal development was just phenomenal. And, I know I changed wholeheartedly as a person in my outlook. As a result, I mean, obviously things had happened over the years prior to that, and other life experiences. But once you understand and you learn how to view the world in a different way, and you understand more about how the brain works, and you start to pick up and you have these moments and this clarity, and you might not understand, might not grasp every single NLP tool and technique, but you grasp the ones that resonate, because we obviously all experience the world in different ways, and then you know what to bring in then when you're working with your coaching clients.
For sure. Fantastic toolkit by the time you finished, even though you're not quite sure how to use the tools at first, but you've got the toolkit, and you learn by using them. But the other aspect that I think was so important, and I know that people talk about it a great deal with counselling courses, but I think it's the same for coaching, is being willing to look at your own stuff. I can't remember the expression now, you'll probably be able to think of it, but there was something about stepping in and out of your own frame of reference. Do you remember? Are you in your own frame of reference when you're with the client, when we're giving feedback? Were you at that point? Were you in your own frame of reference, or did you remember to step out of that and just be in the client's frame of reference? So it's all about sorting out your own shit, actually. Making sure you've done that before you bring any of your shit, if I may use these words on your... You
may use that word.
Making sure you've got that sorted out, you can name it and clear it up a bit with a shovel before you start trying to offer anything to a coachee or client, I believe. That was really important.
Yeah, and also one of there was so much, like ask, not tell, and the opposite behaviours continuum, and being disassociating and association, and sort of understanding and getting into and stepping into somebody else's shoes, feeling it and seeing it, but also sort of stepping back and listening. You mentioned listening when you first opened and introduced yourself. You see, I was listening.
Yeah, you were. And I'm an experienced listener now, whereas actually in my former life, all I ever wanted to do was broadcast only, as my daughter calls it. What are we on?
No.
Broadcast only. Everything was all about me.
Well, giving you the platform, Caroline, can you talk and share with my fabulous listeners all about you? Because obviously your journey through life, as you've said, you've kept evolving, you've kept changing, but you have... From what I know about you, obviously from the umpteen conversations we've had, the hours and hours of conversations we've had over the last 10 years, I've learnt a lot about you and the journey you've been on. But would you mind sort of charting some of that, please, to enlighten the listener? Because I think it's very empowering for people to hear how much work you've done on yourself to get to where you are right now, and actually still view yourself very much as a work in progress, as I do myself.
Yeah, and I always will be a work in progress, of course. But actually, the work didn't even start. I didn't even think anything needed changing or working on until about 22 years ago, actually. So it's not really been that long that I've been on this journey of... I don't want to say self-improvement, because I always think of Robert Holden, who says, nothing's more valuable, no amount of self-improvement can replace self-acceptance. So I won't talk about self-improvement, but I certainly I needed to change things in my life about 22 years ago, because I'd reached an awful rock bottom through addiction to alcohol at the time. And so, but before I became addicted to alcohol, I was a very different person. And, this person that I was telling you about that would really only ever be on broadcast only, I had no social skills to actually consider things like let's go fundamental. I didn't really know how to say, how are you? How's your week been? How are you feeling? So what have you been up to? I was so hungry for attention, I suppose, fundamentally, that my behaviour manifested in the way that I would just, someone started to listen to me, I would just talk endlessly and without any boundaries whatsoever. So, for instance, if I made a phone call to somebody, I wouldn't consider what time I was ringing them. It could be middle of tea time when I knew they got small children and they were probably cooking dinner. It could be late at night. It could be any time that suited me because I wanted to talk to somebody. And I would then talk on the phone to that person, not asking, is it a good time? Or not making the phone call in advance. All the things that I've learned to do today, and just talk until the poor soul at the other end, if they had any boundaries at all, would say, look, I'm sorry, I really need to go now. And I can remember, it was in the 1990s, I can remember one of those occasions, and I can't tell you what a pain of rejection it caused in my chest when she just said to me, with one child on her hip, stirring a saucepan, trying to get dinner for the other child. Of course, she should never have answered the phone to me, but that's not the point.
There probably wasn't caller recognition then, Caroline.
I'm going to go now because I've got to give the children their tea. And in my head, all I could think was, but I haven't finished telling you what I want to tell you. I was so hurt. I never forget things like that because they're so alien to how I am today. I don't ever want to forget, not in a punishing way, but I don't ever want to forget what I was like before, because I don't ever want to be like that again. And that, I suppose, all of that neediness and attention seeking, if you like, literally, I suppose, like so many people that have had difficult childhoods, stem from a difficult childhood, where what do they call it nowadays? They've got a list of about 10 things that can happen to children. They call them adverse childhood experiences. I'm so pleased there's a name for it now, because when I was born in the mid-50s, and they didn't give a name to anything that happened to children in those days. It didn't seem very important, as long as they were quiet and not seen, and didn't make a fuss. But yes, so there was this list of 10 adverse childhood experiences, and I can remember coming across them when I was training to be a family support worker, not that many years ago, but doing some training. And I thought, oh, this is fun, I'll go through the list and see how many I tick off. And I think the only ones out of the 10 I didn't tick was a parent has murdered someone, or a parent has been murdered, and a parent has gone to prison. So that was quite good. There was some I didn't tick. But
oh my gosh!
But the point of the adverse child experiences, I gather, is it's like a way of measuring how likely it is that child, as they grow up, is going to be prone to very dysfunctional relationships or addiction, or being very drawn to being in relationship with addiction, or someone with addiction, or someone with very dysfunctional behaviour, blah, 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 blah. And actually, it was such a relief in the 2000s when I was doing this training I felt validated, actually. I felt like, oh, so I wasn't making a fuss then.
No, you suddenly realised that it was a thing, and it was like it had been recognised, it had been acknowledged, which gives you, as you say, it validates how you'd been feeling, and you're not alone in how you'd been feeling, because all of those things had impacted on you. And let's face it, it's learnt behaviour, isn't it? What you go through in those first 7 years of your life is learnt behaviour, so it's understandable that then you replicate it.
Absolutely. I mean, in the first, I don't want to bore you with my entire history, because we haven't got time. When you're 60-something, you've got a very long history. It's all right for a 20-something-year-old to give you their life history, because it doesn't take so long. But long story short, very, very, very dysfunctional childhood, with parents that were honestly doing the very best they could, but they were pretty resourceless. And I know that looking back. I mean, I do have a lot of compassion. They're both dead now. They'd be in their hundreds if they were still around. But, I have a lot of compassion now for them. But I didn't when I was younger. I was very angry and very angry and very bitter and unforgiving towards them for a long time. And that doesn't do you any good either. Resentment is like drinking poison, isn't it? And expecting the other person to die. It doesn't really hurt the other person unless you're constantly telling them how awful they are.
No, because you're just telling yourself, aren't you? Because actually, what you say and what you speak actually affects your subconscious. It's not really doing anything to anybody else at all.
So yeah, like you said something just then about this business of what's been modelled or all that you know, and of course, growing up in a as I say, a very chaotic and really unpleasant household actually. I mean, I think the worst part of my childhood probably was when my father remarried and my stepmother was an alcoholic, but not the stereotypical sort that you might find passed out or slurring when she spoke or not able to walk along a straight line. No, not that sort of alcoholic. It was the behaviour, which is, common in other scenarios other than alcoholism, but it's that behaviour of the unpredictability, the mood swings, irrational behaviour. When you're a child or a young teenager, coming home and almost like sniffing the air to see if you could just work out what sort of atmosphere am I coming home to today. Luckily, I do say very luckily, all three of us, my stepsister and my brother and I, were sent to boarding school, but actually that probably kept us away from the dysfunction, for most of the year. I certainly benefited from being away from it, but it was very destructive and very damaging actually when you live in that environment where you're told, shown, and it's demonstrated that you are not valued. No one wants to know what you think. Don't talk about it. Don't answer back. Just that whole, it's like you become very invisible. And I think, again, trying not to go on for too long, but I think that's where the attention seeking comes from. People always use the expression about young people at school, particularly that, all this attention seeking. But as a family support worker, many years later in the 20-teens, let's say, and I was working with young people that had been sent to get some sort of help from me, if you like, because they were attention seeking, I would be like, well, attention seeking means that someone needs attention.
Yeah.
It's not that they're nasty, manipulative, bad young people, which is how sometimes busy members of staff might see them because they disrupt the lesson and the teaching and they are a very great inconvenience. But actually attention seeking means they're seeking attention. And I think all my experiences as a teenager, I have never forgotten. I don't hold on to them now in a sort of negative way. I've never forgotten them because they help me to find absolute compassion and empathy for all the young people that I've worked with when I was in school. I totally get it. I totally get it. And I've often had clients as a coach that have been quite young because of my experience. Obviously I get parental permission if they're under 18, but I have worked with young people at 16, 17 and 18 years of age. And even though I'm chronologically very much older, I still have enough ability to stay fresh on what it was like to be in those family situations and how it felt, to be able to get into their shoes and offer them some of my experiences, to ask things like if it matches anything that they have been thinking and feeling. If not, it sets them on a springboard to be able to say, no, it wasn't quite like that. It was more like this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's nothing more empowering, is there, than somebody who's listening to you and you're being heard, because that whole thing that you were saying about attention seeking, it is about wanting to be heard, but they don't know how to go about it because they haven't got the skills in order to do something about it because they're too young to understand. But and the journey that you've gone on, the fact that you can do that and you have been doing that and you are such a great listener because of your experience is phenomenal, which is why you got on so well with doing that. But you've gone on a massive journey, haven't you, yourself, to sort of get through all of that and to get to where you are now. So what fundamentally did you do? I mean, it's, how would people sort of follow suit?
Well, that's interesting because, anyone can use what I used, but of course they probably wouldn't unless they were in a particular fellowship. But what I used is the 12 steps. 12 steps of two fellowships, actually. Al-Anon, which is for families and friends of alcoholics, because I grew up in an alcoholic household, but also AA, which, as most people know, that better, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think the 12-step program can be found in other forms in all sorts of self-help practices or group practices. It's used and talked about by so many people nowadays. I mean, if anyone who follows Russell Brand, and anything that he has to say will be able to see where he is using examples from the 12-step program.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that many of the speakers that I value listening to, that are very well known, most of them have been through 12-step programs or have knowledge of 12-step programs. So I'm talking, I mean, almost anyone that I have valued over the years. So, for instance, I would say Susan Jeffers, Fear and Do It Anyway. Louise Hay had a good knowledge of the 12 steps. These are all people that have had adverse childhood experiences, have done their work to recover from it and to change. Psychic change is fundamental. And that's what this 12 steps promise. They promise that working these steps brings about a psychic change. I think that's a wonderful expression, but it's backed up by Carl Jung, I think it was, who was very interested in the 12 steps, and he said he felt that addicts, in other words, people living dysfunctionally, and addicts needed a psychic change in order to be able to let go of the addiction and the habits, the compulsions, and that thinking. And that's what I did, sort of in a nutshell. But I love the 12 steps because, it covers everything. It covers, I mean, if I went through it...
I was going to ask you, what are those 12 steps? What are they?
If I went through them with you, which I wouldn't do today because it would take too long, but you would be able to see, because I know you'd be able to see that you have done the same sort of thing, but in a different way, which is why I'm saying that they're not mutually exclusive. They're not just, you don't have to join a 12-step fellowship. So the process of my recovery using the 12 steps was to, when it came to addiction, was to admit defeat over it, because I could not stop drinking. I could not. I promise I tried and tried and tried, but I could not stop drinking. It had complete control over my life. It completely ruined my life. And it was getting into a very, very dangerous situation. I mean, absolutely desperate. And I could not stop. And it was very, very frightening. And so the first thing I had to realise is that I cannot control my addiction. So therefore, I need to surrender. I need to surrender and put my hands up and say, do you know, I'm done. I'm absolutely done. It's like me and alcohol are in a boxing ring, and I eventually get the sense to take my gloves off and say to alcohol, look, mate, you stay there, carry on. But I am getting out of the ring here. And getting out of the ring and walking away, no longer trying to win over it, trying to fight it. So there you're admitting you're powerless over alcohol. And also coming to realise that trying to be powerful over alcohol, trying to defeat it in that boxing ring where you're about 2 foot high and it's 7'4", it was insane. It's about recognising the insanity of the behaviour up until now, closely followed by acknowledging that if you're powerless over alcohol and your unmanageable life, perhaps it'd be a good idea to find a power. So you need to find a power. So, of course, AA back in the day, which was 1935-ish, I believe, of course, America, it still is quite, but it definitely was then a very Christian country. So it was all about God. They would use a traditional idea of a Christian deity. But over the years, 75 years in this country, but much longer in America, since 1935, it's a concept of a power greater than yourself, to which you make a decision, you decide what that power might be, as long as you've only got one rule, and that is that it's not you. So that's the thing, isn't it? So all you've got to do is recognise that there is a higher power, and it's not you. So who cares what you find? G-O-D, good orderly direction. G-O-D, great outdoors. G-O-D, gift of desperation. G-O-D, group of drunks, because there's an enormous power in a room of AA, which is full of people in recovery. Fantastic energy. So there you go. You've got an idea that something bigger than you might get you out of this hole. And then after a bit of resistance, of course, because we're only human, and a lot of cogitating, you might decide that you might turn your will and your life over to this power so that it could steer things and give you a bit of guidance. That's always...
Hence the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, the spiritual side. It's a spiritual program. It's no longer a religious one. But by that time, and by the time you're doing this, I should have mentioned, because it's very important, that you found yourself a mentor or a sponsor. As they call it, a sponsor in America. It doesn't involve money at all. It's just somebody. So in our world, if you like, it would be like a coach maybe, or a mentor.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
It would be somebody that's got their head around it a bit more and can tell you a little bit about how they did it, or can be with you as you take your journey through it and guide you through and explain the steps to you, and talk to you about what we call our big book, which is a great name for it. It's just literally our textbook on the 12 steps and on how to recover. So, so you've got step 4, then... step 3, sorry, you begrudgingly, probably because you're human, you think, well, I'll give it a whirl. I'll give it a go, letting God take it.
Yes, go on then.
Give it a whirl. And then the sticking point, but it's so valuable, and it really helped me, is to sit down and start taking into account your behaviour. How you've behaved, what you've got up to, how you've tackled life up until now. For instance, on my list of ways that I've been tackling life up until now, I really needed to put down, well, up until now, I used to get my needs met by, taking people hostage and keeping them on the phone for hours, being very demanding. I mean, that's just one of many things that cropped up. So it's about looking at how you've been, what behaviours you've used up until now as your coping mechanisms. When you grow up in a very dysfunctional household, you learn some very unpleasant ways of coping. I mean, I can remember my stepmother accusing me of being manipulative, devious, sly, underhand, and a liar. Well, of course, I resented that for years. But over the years, since then, I've realised that is what I was to her, in her opinion, because it was the only way to get round this massive block of alcoholic behaviour. Because in order to be direct, to be honest, to be all those things that I would love to have been as a child, it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe.
No.
That's what happens. You learn to be this conniving, going round because you can't get your needs met directly. So, there you go. That's an example. So, but those things do need to be on the list, because that's not the way one wants to live going forward. That's not the new life. The new life is to be able to feel honest, ask for your needs to be met directly, consider others, make space for others to speak, all that stuff. So you've made your list, or you've gone through your thoughts, if you like, with your sponsor, who's someone that's totally trustworthy, isn't going to go blabbing to everybody what you've told them. They've probably done nothing any worse than you have. So that, they'll probably share a little bit about what they got up to in life and how they can understand, what you're going through, and they've done similar things. And by the time you've talked to someone else about it and written it down and sort of admitted to it, you've gone past step 5 then, which is when you share it with yourself, with your higher power and another person. And then you start considering how you might want to use better behaviours than the ones you were using. So it's about becoming willing to adapt your behaviours and pick up some more healthy coping strategies rather than the ones you have been using, and trying to let go of the old behaviours, so that if they're a bit like a muscle, if you don't use the muscle for a while, the muscle will waste away and not be so strong. Or if you don't use a neural pathway, as you often talk about that, then it will weaken, and actually the connection will break. That's what the steps 6 and 7 are about. They're about becoming entirely willing to let go of your sort of character defects or character traits, your negative traits, if you like.
Yes, because we aren't our behaviour, are we? At the end of the day, we can change it.
So it's about trying to change your behaviour. But the beauty of the 12-step programme is that you don't have to do it yourself under your own human willpower. The idea is that if you've got a concept of a higher power, then your higher power will help you to let go of those behaviours, and not all of them get eradicated. But sadly, we don't all turn into Mother Teresa or whatever example you want to use.
Oh, I don't know. You look quite good in your nurse's outfit, but I'm not sure whether it's quite the one that we would recognise as Mother Teresa.
I can keep the eyebrows, but Yeah, so anyway, I don't want to spend too long on this. I'm aware it's taking us a lot of time.
It's fascinating though, Gibbs, because it's really enlightening for people to hear that journey that you've been on and what that involves. And, you know, I'm listening to you and I'm going, yeah, you know, I can recognise all of these elements. And I remember saying to you about coining, because obviously how things have impacted with COVID and one thing or another, and I trademarked my 8 mindset. I remember you saying to me ages ago, well, that 8 mindset, there's elements of that within the 12 steps, and for that it's acceptance, perspective and energy, which are, it is like you were saying about accepting yourself, accepting what you can and you can't change, shifting your perspective and channeling your energy accordingly, and that encompasses all of that, but in a sort of short frame. But that spiritual side, that sort of bit and understanding and giving your way through to a sort of a higher power, you know, and trusting that process and being prepared to trust the process is paramount to that recovery, isn't it? And how long have you been completely sober now?
22 years this year.
Which is absolutely awesome.
It is, and I think, I tell you what, I've met people in life who've put down a drink maybe 22 years ago, but without doing any self-work, they're miserable as sin. Miserable as sin, because, you know, the drink was the crutch, right? The drink was the answer to everything.
Yeah.
When it was working. Of course, it doesn't work towards the end, but when, you know, so that was the solution to everything, was to be oblivious, to black out, to get drunk and not care. Now, if you just put that down, maybe going through a rehab so you're physically dried out, and off you go, going, oh, thanks very much, you'll be all right now. My goodness me, what on earth do you do when you come across life's problems, when you come across other people getting on your nerves, when you come across things not going your way? You know, you still don't know how to get your needs met in a healthy way. Whatever sort of human being are you left with? It must be. I've got friends who live with dry drunk partners, and it's awful. It's an awful scenario. They're not happy. They make everybody.
Yes. You've got to do the inner work as well, haven't you?
It doesn't have to be the 12 steps. It might be therapy. You know, it might be, I don't know, inspirational books or talks by many people, because there's so much on the internet now, isn't there? And, you know, your Brené Browns, your Russell Brands, your, you know, whoever it is that you think can help direct you. You know, all the Hay House speakers that we talk about quite often. There's, you know, yes, you can get your ideas from that. But I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, the 12 steps have only been around since 1935, but Bill W., who was one of the founders of the fellowship, he would have drawn that from the influences that were already around. So I know back in the day, he drew a lot of influences in the early days from something called the Oxford movement, which was, obviously, it was a Christian thing, but it was about that business of being willing to look at yourself and to admit when you're wrong, and to not be so driven and self-reliant, but to rely on and in those days, obviously God, but a power outside of yourself. But it's not that alien today. People are looking for support from they talk about the universe, don't they? People are much keener to talk about the universe and, you know, outside energy, vibrations, all that stuff. It fits in beautifully with the 12 steps. And just to finish the 12 steps, you make a list of people that you know you've harmed during the time that you were acting out, and you become willing to sort of make amends to them. And even if you can't see them or they've died or whatever, you know that you would make amends if you could. And for me, having teenage sons at the time, so they were still living at home, my greatest amends to them was to stay sober, but also to give them all the attention and be emotionally available to them and be a proper boundaried good parent to them where I hadn't been before. That was my amends to them. And that, you know, we've got a really good relationship today. And I've got an older daughter as well who also comes under that sort of umbrella, if you like. And then finally, to be prepared to apologise as you go through life when you have put, when you put a foot wrong here and there. So it takes humility and honesty. But the most important part, I suppose, is keeping conscious contact and meditating when possible, and being prayerful, if you like, with your concept of whatever your higher power is. So keeping that contact going, asking for guidance very often throughout the day, if you like, depending on what sort of day you're having. And being willing, more than anything else in the world, being willing to share with other people who need to know about what's on offer here, telling them about it. The most important thing is to get through the steps and become a sponsor and help other people, to share your experience, strength and hope at the meetings for people that are new in, to do service to keep the fellowship running. All of this is voluntary. There's no money involved.
Well, I know, but you know that I know, then I know that you know that how much work that you do on a voluntary basis through other work that you do as well. And it's just phenomenal. And I crikey, the thing is with Gibbs and I, we can talk for hours. And we've already rattled through 40 minutes. But as you can tell, listeners, Caroline is so insightful, so reflective, so knowledgeable. There's a font of knowledge, and we've not even touched on some of this wicked humour that it's just we have a laugh, but there's just so much. This is why I obviously love catching up with and chatting and meeting with Caroline, aka Gibbs, and Liz, aka Bram, on a regular basis, as you can tell. But sadly, we've come to the end of this wonderful chat, which is a real. I know. We shall have to do part 2. Definitely, we shall book in for part 2. But I know at the moment you've got a group that you work with, which is restarting in September 2022. It's online, isn't it? But anyway, how do people get in touch, Caroline? Because obviously there is so much knowledge to be shared, and you have got this group. So
how do they get in touch? Through you if they're interested? Because if people are following you and your podcast, could you ask them to ask you? I can give you. You can put my email address on something somewhere.
I will do. But can you shout it out loud?
Yeah, it's caroline.gibbs.54@gmail.com. I used to have a sort of fancy business address, but I got bored with it in the end. And I didn't want to pay the subscription anymore. I'm just being honest with you. So that's just my email address. But if people have forgotten that or weren't listening, and who can blame them?
It's fascinating. So be so self-deprecating.
They could look on my website, which is caroline-gibbs.com.
Awesome. You see, she's got a website and everything, and she's on LinkedIn. And what's this group that you've got that is no longer a meetup group? It's off, not on Meetup.
Started on Meetup, but it sort of grew itself. It's fortnightly, starting from September. Dates can be informed about if you ask me. It's on a Wednesday night, 7 till 8:30. We have a different focus every session. The focuses are pretty much chosen by people within the group. What I love best about the group is that I don't give all the talks. That's the best bit. I encourage the members of the group to deliver the session that they're interested in themselves. And it is, to me, it's all about empowerment.
You facilitate empowerment.
Yeah, I facilitate, because it's very empowering for people to be allowed to take the stage and have the nerve to put something together and give it a go. And they just absolutely love it afterwards. It's a real esteem raiser as well. We have fascinating topics. We've had stoicism, we've got prejudice. Imagine that's a topic coming up. We've had all sorts of fascinating things. We had how my dad and I dealt with cancer without using the NHS. That was an interesting one. Very varied, very interesting.
Very, very varied. So if you're interested, get in touch with Caroline via her website or via the email address she's just given us, and I will put it into the.
The first session is free.
First session is free, and let me inform you that the sessions aren't overly expensive either. They're very, very underpriced.
Listen, listeners, they're always telling me that Nailz and Bram to put my prices up, but I'm just so stubborn. So come along before I get persuaded to put my price up.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Gibbs, aka Caroline Gibbs. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, which I am sure you will have done, please do rate and review, follow, subscribe, share away. Let's spread this happiness and knowledge and insight and wisdom globally, as we already are doing, but let's send it further afield and into much more, further into the countries. Tell your friends. So this is me, Sarah J Naylor, of course, Harnessing Happiness, and you can find me on my website, sarahjnaylor.com, or on LinkedIn, or on whatever platform you want. I'm usually lurking around somewhere. Thank you so much, and for now, take care, goodbye, and lots of love from me. Take care, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Harnessing Happiness podcast with Sarah J Naylor. If you took value from the content, please follow the show on your podcast app. And to find out more about Sarah's ape mindset, visit sarahjnaylor.com. That's